Donald Trump is grumpy again. Let's check in on that. Why don't we? He's been angrily posting over the last few hours. And I want to start with this. Something that we heard him articulate at one of his recent rallies that just gets to how insecure he is about his crowds since Vice President Harris broke his brain at the debate. He wrote this: Kamala and Sleepy Joe are going out of their way to make it difficult for me to campaign. We had one of the biggest crowds I've ever seen Saturday in Wisconsin, where a terrible migrant crime was recently committed, and we ended up having to use a 750-seat theater, having to send away more than 50,000 people. They were unable to give us Secret Service protection commensurate with the crowd because they had to protect the president of Iran, who was doing everything possible to kill me at the United Nations event. We complained like hell, but there was nothing we could do. So I already addressed that, most of it in the rally segment that we did, because he said it at that rally, or the rally right after it. He said, there was a smaller crowd, but that's only because so many 50,000, maybe 100, maybe 200,000 people were outside waiting, and they couldn't get in because it was a small venue, not because of me, not because of my popularity, but because of Biden and Vice President Harris. Which, it is funny that he's acting like Vice President Harris and President Joe Biden make individual decisions about Secret Service protection, even if we believed his reasoning. But also, MAGA is now upset that they're taking precautions to put him inside instead of outside often, or at least behind bulletproof glass, or going above and beyond to make sure that he's safe. And if they feel like they don't have the enhanced Secret Service protection that he's been getting lately on standby because of other obligations of Secret Service, whether it be the reason he cited or something else, then isn't that in line with them trying to keep Trump more safe given the failures in security that have led to those assassination attempts? So a little bit contradictory there, and obviously based on lies, because no, there were not 50,000 people waiting outside that venue, unfortunately for him. If you enjoy this show, please do click that subscribe button. Easy, free, simple, but makes all the difference. Back to the video. Next post. There's something wrong with Kamala. I just don't know what it is, but there's something missing and everybody knows it. Over the weekend, he called Vice President Harris mentally impaired. He's escalating his attacks against her because he sees that she's making more and more ground in her appeal to Americans. And so they're a similar message. He wrote, to all the rapists, drug dealers, human traffickers, and murderers, welcome to America. And then he goes on to do his normal blaming of Harris for border problems. He wrote, CNN will not put on a Republican conservative, nor will MSDNC, but Fox is constantly putting on liberal Democrats to counter previous guests from the right, thereby nullifying any message they may happen to give. The fake news is already unfair enough to Republicans. We don't need it from Fox also. Now, CNN and MSNBC do bring on conservatives rather often, and Trump doesn't care about what they're doing in relation to what Fox News is doing. He just thinks Fox News needs to be fully, as if it's not already, a propaganda arm of his. And before going on to this next post, where he lashes out at Bill Maher, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, which is there's this idea in MAGA that Mark Cuban actually really nicely refuted, which is that all of the powerful media outlets are slanted against Trump. All the powerful media entities are anti-Trump. And that's what justifies in their mind a lot of the crazy propaganda outlets that they go to. We got to go to Newsmax, OAN, because all the mainstream media is biased against Trump. And we've already talked about how I actually don't accept that framing at all. But beyond just not accepting that the mainstream media has this irrational, unfactual, anti-Trump bias, remember that Fox News is the biggest cable news outlet. And it's actually many of the right-wing online platforms and podcasts, and the right-wing media infrastructure is so prominent, in many cases more prominent than that of its mainstream, quote-unquote, liberal media counterparts. So the point that Cuban made was actually mainstream media are your big right-wing platforms. And you don't have a problem with that. MAGA doesn't have a problem with the fact that Fox News just statistically puts out more fake, false, distorted stories than a CNN does, for example. In the interest of Republicans, they're insanely biased, more so than any mainstream liberal outlet, against Democrats, against Vice President Harris, but that's never a part of their analysis. It's only when it feels like mainstream media is too biased do they care. Then Trump wrote this: I seldom watch low-rated Bill Maher, but when I do, I marvel at the fake laughter on the show. It sounds like a bad laugh machine. It's so obnoxious and disgusting. Just like him, always laughing no matter what is said. Have you been to one of your own rallies where they laugh at things that are not funny that you say? I think you should be okay with people just laughing because they like the person. Otherwise, you would get no laughter. Real Republicans hate it when Fox puts Crazy Bill on far too often to show that the left agrees with us. Fox out to get smart and not use losers. Oh, sorry. Fox ought to get smart and not use losers like this. Also, they shouldn't allow negative ads. Think about that. He wants to control everything about even Fox News, where negative ads, he only means about him, we know it, shouldn't be allowed on Fox News. And the interesting thing about that post was that he said Bill Maher is not someone he usually watches. That's interesting because last week, he also posted right after Real Time with Bill Maher, a post about Bill Maher saying the ratings challenged Bill Maher on his increasingly boring show on HBO is really having a hard time coping with Trump derangement syndrome, and he goes on to insult him in many different ways. So even though Trump tries to act like no one watches it, Trump watches it. Trump, despite saying he seldom watches Bill Maher, clearly does watch him regularly and lashes out at him. This was a bit of Bill Maher's show from this weekend. Maybe they got under Trump's skin.
The key issue is that democracy is based on trust, whereas dictatorship is based on terror. If you systematically destroy trust in institutions, destroy trust in the media, in academia, in the courts, and so forth, some people think that this is liberating the people from these institutions.
Right.
It's not. When you destroy all trust, the only thing that can still work is a dictatorship. Right. So this is what would-be dictators do. They systematically destroy trust. And the other thing to realize is that the vast majority of information is not truth. A key misconception, especially in places like Silicon Valley, is to equate information with truth. Most information is junk. I mean, the truth is a very rare and costly and precious sub-kind of information, because, to write a truthful story, you need to invest a lot of time and effort and money in research and fact-checking, whereas fiction is very, very cheap.
Yeah, I've said it before, it is really stressful, irritating, but fascinating to see when someone has, as so many of these figures we talk about on a daily basis do, so little attachment to reality. It must be so easy to speak. Think about Trump. When he talks, oh, Michigan, I was the man of the year there. No, you weren't. Oh, we won the 2020 election. No, you didn't. Whatever it is that he's saying on a daily basis, that's just him saying things he wants to be true. And for him, it doesn't matter if it is or isn't or is partial. None of those things matter. It's just, do I want it to be true? So I'll say it as if it is. So then you don't have to do any of the hard work of fact checking yourself. Or often when I'm speaking, I've told you this before, and I'll start making points and trying to reference, and based on an analysis from this institution. What's difficult about both delivering speech in an effective way while also thinking through what you're saying, sort of off the top of your head, is making sure that in the moment, if you're just spitballing, the things that are coming out of your mouth are still factual, still based on accurate stats, and you're referencing the 7 out of 10, or is it 8 out of... And that's a big part of what is difficult in politics about speaking off the cuff, is making sure that any strong points that you make, any reference data is accurate, of course. So you're constantly listening to what you're saying and fact checking it as you're going along. If you don't have that burden and you can just say whatever you want to be true, it probably is much easier. And that's why, as we've cultivated this environment where truth matters less and less, it becomes the path of least resistance, because the social punishment for lying has become so much less severe due to Trumpism, and some of the social media bubbles that people live in. And so if it becomes that you can do a thing that's actually intellectually easier and is more socially advantageous, things fall apart very quickly. One more moment from Friday's edition of Real Time with Bill Maher.
Axios put this out today. 54% of respondents in a survey agreed with the statement, "I've disengaged from politics because I can't tell what's true." And I thought, throughout this campaign, I've been reading the paper, of course, many different papers. One day, I'll look and it'll be like crime is way down. The next day, crime's way up, depending on where you look. I'm in this business, and I can't tell you whether crime is up or down, because I feel like I'm one of these people. Although I can't disengage, it's my job. But I don't know what's true or not. And then I read about Janet Jackson. Did you see what she said about?
No.
Oh, okay. You people know. She's talking about Kamala Harris, and she said, "Well, I heard her father's white," because that's what Trump said. And this is Janet Jackson, and they were like, "Why are you saying this?" She said, "That's what I heard." And then lots of people are, "Oh, it's a conspiracy." It's like, oh, please don't overthink it. This is exactly what Trump does. People are telling me, I'm hearing. Don't overthink it. It's just that people are not that bright. They're not well informed, especially celebrities. So it's not a conspiracy. This is just somebody said this to her, or she saw it somewhere, and this is what she is now thinking.
You know, Bill,
Yeah. And in that environment, Trump thrives. Because it really is becoming, as I said, socially advantageous to be dishonest if it serves an ideology. And we can't allow that to happen, because what we're seeing in Trump, and there are some people, I think because they feel like the environment necessitates it on our quote unquote side, play into this as well. But you start communicating with your fellow members of a certain ideology through signals you're sending. Like when you say crime's up, a lot of the followers will believe that's true. A lot of leaders don't actually think crime's up, but they'll say it not because they believe it, but because it's sending a signal about their political views, which then is showing which group they're in, and they think is making a broader, okay, maybe crime's not technically going up and it's actually plummeting, but we feel less safe because of the border or something. And so there's a point they feel like but that's how things fall apart. And given there are so many problems with quote unquote corporate media, and Fox News really deteriorated journalistic ethics within even that framework. But with all of the issues there, we have to be honest about the issues in quote unquote independent media too, because of the incentivizing of provocative content. Algorithms, when people are engaging with it, negative or positive, it pushes out those things because they'll keep people on the platform longer. And so what you're seeing is a similar, if I can be making a point with, there's an underlying point to a lie, then it's an acceptable one. Seems to be a moral adjustment that a lot of people are making. And that is not how we can operate, because democracy, we need a well-informed electorate to be able to function effectively. I do think the example that Bill Maher cited is not a great one, the violent crime one, because that's really easy truth to ascertain, given that the entity that we traditionally go to, and we should, and we've agreed, is the entity that's going to gather crime data from other entities, being law enforcement departments. police departments is the FBI crime statistics they release. And those you can just check yourself, demonstrate that crime has been declining. So that being cited is one that's impossible to figure out the truth on. I don't love, but I get the point that's being made there. And then the other thing I'll say on this is, as hard as it's becoming to ascertain truth, it can't be our response to disengage, as that sometimes feels easier and simpler, because there is truth. It doesn't mean there's not truth just because it's harder to get to. There is truth. It takes more work to confirm. We have to get to what's the primary source I can go check based on which outlet is telling me what about it. And learning those strategies of checking the outlets that you quote unquote trust is the way that you learn which ones can more quickly get you accurate information. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Support the show by clicking that join button below.